Hey, so I recently bought this planter. This thing's a lot to move around. It weighs 100 pounds and it's bulky. If it doesn't have a dedicated place to live, it gets in the way. So I solved that problem with this cart, and I'm going to show you how I built it.
Having a small shop in a two-car garage, I run into problems like this often. There's not 8 feet in between my table saw and that garage door. With that problem solved, let's start breaking down some plywood. Having wheels on everything that is too large to easily pick up and move around is essential. That way you can do things like this. I started by designing everything in SketchUp. Here's a preview. Hopefully by the end of this video, I'll have something that looks a little bit like this. After getting all of my dimensions from my cuts from SketchUp, I took them along with the stock I'm going to be working with and put them into a website called Cut List Optimizer, and it gave me the cut list you see here that I'm working off of. Up until this point, I had been cutting these wide pieces with my crosscut sled. This one was a little bit too wide, so I pulled out my Bora straight edge clamp with my trusty circular saw and cut it that way. Who needs a fancy track saw? Actually, me. I would like one. At this point in the evening, I realized something's not quite right. Sure enough, I cut a square when I should have cut a rectangle. Time to call it a night. The next morning, with a fresh cup of coffee and a revised cut list, I'm ready to get back at it. But that doesn't look right either. Wait, that's square. Thought last night we figured out it was supposed to be a rectangle. I didn't make that mistake again, did I? I guess coffee hadn't kicked in yet. I need a little more coffee. Determined not to make the same mistake again, I revised my cut list one more time and gave it another go. This time, I made it through without any miscuts. When designing the cart, I decided that I wanted to use dados to help with connecting the sides to the bottom and with the middle shelf. So I set my dado blade up to 3/4 of an inch and ran my first side through. So 3/4 of an inch, yeah, it might be sold as that, but it's actually 18 millimeters, which is 1 millimeter short. So as you can see here, it's not as snug as I would like it to be. I should have remembered this from watching another YouTuber, but experience is the best teacher. So I readjusted my dado blade and ran it back through. This time, it's a little too tight, but instead of resetting my dado blade, I just bumped my fence over a hair and ran it back through across the dado to shave the last little bit off. Let's see how that fits. Ah, perfect. The top corners of the sides are going to be notched in at 3/4 of an inch. The flip top will have a side that extends out and rests on these tabs, preventing it from rotating more than 180 degrees. This keeps the electrical wiring on the inside from getting twisted up and breaking. Using a speed square as a guide to help me cut a straight line, I cut the tabs out with my jigsaw. I mark out where the flip top is going to align with the sides, and then figure out where center is so that I know where to drill the holes for the pipe that's going to act as our hinge. Since I don't have a fancy drill press with Forstner bits, I'm using a 1-inch paddle bit in my power drill. Drilling part of the way through, then flipping it over, finishing the hole from the other side cuts down on almost any tear out that I might have. Now this 1-inch galvanized pipe is actually 1.08 inches. Luckily it's threaded, and a 1-inch hole is wide enough to allow the threads to grab and pull the pipe through with a little bit of extra effort. Using the hole already drilled, I drill the holes for the flip top sides, repeating the process, drilling part of the way through, flipping it over, drilling the rest of the way through. And then of course I have to drive the pipe back through. Did I mention I had to do this 4 times? I was working up a sweat, and as you can see I had to open up the garage to let some airflow in. Thankfully, through the magic of video editing, I was able to spare you that agony. I was able to find a way to speed up the process using this pipe wrench and the ability to speed up the video in the editing software. And look at that. It kind of works. Assembly time. Here you're going to see why I chose to use dados. All I have to do is apply an ample amount of glue and then drop my side into the dado groove. I'll attach it with some 90-degree clamps, and then I'll take some bar clamps to hold it in place. I don't have enough time to wait for the glue to dry, and I don't have enough clamps to clamp everything up. The theme of this build is going to be screws and glue. So I'll mark me a line of where my screws need to go, bore some countersink holes, and drive in some screws. Then I repeat the process, dropping my side into the dado groove, which I've already applied glue to, and attaching it with my 90-degree clamps, boring some countersink holes and driving some screws. The dados also came in handy when installing the middle piece. All I had to do was apply some glue, slide it in, and secure it with screws. Using the best glue spreader I could find on the market, I apply some glue to the sides of the shelves, hold them in place with my 90-degree clamps, and then add some screws to the bottom. Then bore me some more countersink holes using this nice little flip bit that I had found at the Big Blue box store. I've seen some other brands, but this thing sure is handy. With not having a drill and driver, and this being my only drill, it saves me a lot of time not having to change out bits. And you'll see I use it quite a bit during this build. The only thing you get to see of me installing the shelves is this clip here of me aligning it, because I forgot to hit record when I actually installed them. I decided to add an extra piece of plywood to the bottom of the sides because this is where the casters are going to sit. And the screws for the casters are more than 3/4 of an inch. I wanted to make sure to give them enough material to grab on without breaking through the bottom of my shelves. Once I get all the casters installed, you know you've got to give the wheelies a spin before you flip it over. How can you just not? So I flip it over and give a test, and just in time before quality control showed up. Seriously, I think they think I built this for them. It is a good sign that my 2-year-old can push his older sister around on it pretty easily. Whoa! I didn't know this was going to be a crash test. After surviving the quality control test, I got back to assembly. This panel fits so tightly it needed a little bit of encouragement to get it to where it needed to go. Since it did have such a tight fit, I skipped the glue and went straight to screws. And that way, if I decide to do something different with it, I can remove it in the future. Now that the base to the cart is complete, it's time to start assembling the flip top. This back panel is only going to be connected with screws because it's going to be the access panel for my electrical outlet, and I'm going to need to be able to remove it. Everything else is going to be screws and glue. As I apply the glue, I'm being careful not to put any on the back panel. Using my God-given glue spreader, I place the bottom. Oh, wait, which is this one? I guess it really depends on which side of the flip cart is flipped over. We'll call it the top for now because that's the one that's facing up. I'll bore some countersink holes and fill it full of screws. I flip it over, and using my router, I make channels for the power cables of the tools. Now I need to make a hole for the electrical wiring that's going to go to my electrical box. It would have been much easier if I would have remembered to do this before I assembled everything. And then watching the video back, I realized I could have also taken that back panel off and made this much easier on myself. When I put this other top on, I did not use any glue. I want to be able to take it off and access the electrical underneath in case I need to do any maintenance. Also, I plan on buying another tool for this panel in the future, and I'll need to access the bottom to bolt it on. Before I can mount my flip top, I need to cut the pipe. I'm going to use a T-joint to run the electrical through, and that T is going to allow that electrical to come out in the middle of the pipe. I didn't get a good video of me installing the pipe, but here's the T with the threads already inserted and the electricals already ran through it. I found these inexpensive latches on Amazon and decided to put those on to keep the flip top from accidentally getting flipped over. Might not be necessary, but better safe than sorry. Nice. I like when things work out as planned. Now, I don't want kids sticking their finger in the pipe or bugs making their home in there, so I put a little cover over it. Oh, hey look, it's got a tail. Before I could install my inlet, I had to build this little box to house it. Once I got that built, I started stripping the wire and installing everything. Now I'm using 12 gauge wire because that's what most of my tools call for, and it can handle pretty much anything I'm going to put through it. You also see the big thick rubber shielding on it, and that's because it's going to be in this pipe and it's going to be twisting and turning. I probably could have gotten away with the wiring that's used in residential houses, but it's not really made for something that's going to be constantly bending and twisting. Once I get everything ran through that pipe, I go ahead and install my outlet box on the inside. Notice the hanger strap on the mouth of the T-fitting. That's to make sure the pipe flips with the flip top. So it rolls, it flips, and it plugs in. Getting closer. I'm finally at the point that I can mount this planer. I get the planer positioned where I want it to go, and then I mark where my drill holes need to be. The pencils I had were a little bit too fat to fit, so I used my drill bit that I'm going to use for the holes and gave them a quick tap to give me an indentation. Then using my Craig drill guide, I drilled all my holes. Then I needed a spot for the plug to go through, and since the end of that plug's pretty big, I had to bore out a larger hole. Still wasn't quite large enough, so I used a jigsaw to widen it until I could fit the plug through. Once all that was done, I picked up this beast of a planer for hopefully one of the last times and bolted it down. After routing the power cable through the channel I did earlier with my router and plugging it in, I can go ahead and start closing up the flip top and putting all of these screws back in it. And yes, I'm going to make you watch me do them all. I'll just speed it up a little bit. Now the cart is mostly done. I'm going to flip this over. You know, it might have been a little easier to flip if I'd have had the planer all the way down. Sometimes I just have to do things the hard way. Time to plug it in and see if everything works.
So let me give you a tour of the finished product. We'll start with this front side up here. Shelves for storage. I've got stains and glue and paint. Down here, I have a space for a drawer. I have not built that yet, or I might just leave it open and put some bigger tools. On the back side is where I've got clamps right now. So on most of the other videos, they took an extension cord and they cut the end off of it and they ran it to the electrical box they put inside the flip top. I decided I'd rather use an inlet. I haven't seen this done before, but it's in like you have on an RV or a boat. Just plug in my extension cord, and now I'm good to go. Now it's ready to get out of the way. I built this so that I can put another tool on this side, such as an oscillating sander. I don't have one of those right now, so while it's flipped over with nothing on this side, it nests very nicely underneath the wing of my table saw so that it's out of the way when I'm not using it. And there you have it, my version of the flip top tool cart. Man, that's a little bit of a tongue twister. Try saying that 10 times fast. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, click the subscribe button and the little bell beside it to make sure to get notified whenever I post new videos.